Some of you know that I was a hospice chaplain for several years between spending time as the pastor of churches. I became a hospice chaplain, I think, partly because a number of years prior to that, my first wife, Carol, had died of cancer, and she had been a hospice patient for the last few months of her life. I got to experience firsthand the remarkable work hospice people do, how vital it is to the quality of life patients with a life limiting diagnosis, and how helpful it is for their loved ones. So I thought being a hospice chaplain would be a valuable way of doing ministry and a way of paying forward a gift that I'd personally been given as someone whose own loved one had been a hospice patient. I'd been on the receiving end of that care, and I wanted to find a way to give back. I don't mean to make this a commercial message for hospice, but while I'm talking about it, I might as well dispel some common misunderstandings that I still hear all the time. First of all, there's absolutely no reason I can think of that you would not want to be a hospice patient right away if your doctor ever tells you it's possible you might pass away within 6 months and you've decided not to seek additional curative treatment. Too many people wait far too long to enroll in hospice care, whether they want to be cared for at home or they're living in a long term care facility. And that is such a shame, in my opinion. One of the biggest falsehoods out there is that once the initial 6 month period is over, you'll be kicked off hospice care if you don't die within 6 months. So that can be a reason people put it off. But that's simply not true. You just re enroll. I had patients who'd been, let's say, diagnosed with COPD, a very common heart lung disease. The symptoms can be treated, but it's inevitable that it will cause or contribute to your death eventually. I had COPD patients who'd been in continuous hospice care for over 3 years. They just kept re enrolling, no problem. And that's true for many conditions, like dementia, for instance. While you're in a hospice care program, the quality of care that you receive, the additional attention you get from nurses, social workers, chaplains, vocational nurses, it's top notch and great. It's almost always superior to the care you'd receive otherwise because it is being performed by professionals who specialize in that kind of medical care. So, aside from the 6 month or you're out falsehood, why not be on hospice as soon as you can? A couple reasons at least. A lot of folks mistakenly think that hospice is something you call in only at the last minute to make your final hours more comfortable. That hospice is only for end of life care. And that can be true in some cases, especially when a life limiting diagnosis is a complete surprise and not much time is left or is anticipated. But these days, we typically know for many weeks or even many months in advance when a decision can be made by you and your doctor that it's time to make the shift to no longer pursuing curative treatment. So, why not be comfortable for a whole lot longer than waiting until your last hours? Why suffer when there's absolutely no reason to? To prove how tough you are? That's pointless and silly. Another reason some folks avoid hospice is that there is a certain stigma attached to it. It might imply, people mistakenly think, that you're somehow giving up. Heck, my patients hadn't given up on anything. Lots of my patients continued doing everyday things like driving, going shopping, and taking trips. I used to take patients out to get a burger and a milkshake and just drive around their old neighborhood. One patient I had loved a certain brand of Scotch whiskey and enjoyed having a glass every night before bed. So there I was, the chaplain, bringing in a bottle of 12-year-old Macallan's single malt every few weeks. So there's nothing weird about being on hospice. It simply means enjoying the best quality of life possible for the time you have remaining. Again, why not? And another reason many people put it off is that many are simply afraid of their own mortality. It can be uncomfortable to think about, or maybe depressing. Maybe you have some unfinished business you can't figure out how to resolve. So, going on hospice care can be a frightening admission to yourself that, yes, I'm actually going to die. Well, not to be crass or insensitive about it, but one thing we should all pay attention to, and many of us need to work on how we feel about this, is that each and every one of us has a 100% chance of dying. We are all mortal. So while it might feel uncomfortable to think about, given the reality that we were all born with an expiration date, we have two options: to fear or even deny the inevitable, or to acknowledge the reality of our mortality and be okay with that, which is not the same thing as giving up. And not merely be okay with it, but use that knowledge constructively rather than avoid it like, it'll never happen to me. Or even use that awareness, not like the Grim Reaper is lurking around every corner and we should be depressed about that, but to appreciate the precious nature of the time that we have and to be reawakened to how we are spending that resource, that incredible gift of time, to be joyful that we have literally a once in a lifetime opportunity every single day to make a positive difference, to be motivated to do as much good as we can with the time that we have. John's Gospel records a conversation Jesus had with his disciples one day where he reminds them of his own mortality. He says to them, "Little children, I am with you only a little longer." Jesus knows the clock is ticking on his life, and he's making it clear to his disciples what he expects of them, and that includes you and me, with the lives they had and the lives we have. He gives a very simple and rather broad commandment. He says, "Love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Now, I started out discussing why I decided to work as a hospice chaplain because of my experience as a family member of someone near and dear to me who had been a hospice patient, and the desire to somehow pay that forward. But in hindsight, those weren't the real reasons. I was at a point where the accumulation of questions I had about life, about the meaning of life, were really growing in me. It's funny, when you're a minister, you go through seminary and you have plenty of experiences with people you've pledged to care for as their pastor. So over time, you learn a lot about human nature and how people think about their relationship to God. And trust me, everyone thinks about that uniquely. Every member of every church has their own particular understanding about spirituality. Even in churches where, at least on the surface of things, it's assumed everyone shares the exact same beliefs. Well, they don't. I've learned that everyone's different, and I think that's perfectly okay. We're all on a journey, and we're not put here to make sure people fall in line with one so-called correct way of belief. We're not the religious police. No, we're here to support and love each other in the way that Jesus supported and loved his friends and strangers, without any tests of faith or hoops to jump through. We're just here to love one another, to do our best to fulfill that commandment Jesus gave all those years ago, that continues to be the most important thing any of us can do, to simply love. And just like anyone, much less any church member, much less any Christian, even though I'm a minister, and it can be assumed that I might have all the answers, the truth is, when I became a hospice chaplain, and even today, right now, I was not then, and am not today, presumptuous enough to claim I have every answer. Just like you, I'm searching for answers. Like the saying goes, the older I get, I realize how little I know. But especially back then, I was searching in a big way. I wasn't quite sure what I was searching for, but I suppose it was clarification. I felt the urge to better understand some basic stuff that still left me scratching my head. Stuff like, why are we here? What's the meaning of this life? What does it all amount to anyway? Why is it when we love someone, we inevitably lose them or they lose us? Are we here on this planet for a matter of several decades, if we're lucky, and then, well, that's it? On the one hand, it was a comfort to believe that this life was not all there is to life, that we're promised a life beyond where we're reunited with long lost loved ones. But even the Bible itself and different branches of the Christian family tree are inconsistent at best about what that will look like. And we're not even considering all the other religions practiced by our neighbors and people around the world and their beliefs about life after death. Have they got it completely wrong? And we're the only ones who hold the patent on the truth? Because if we do possess the one and only truth, then it's not a very consistent version of the truth. So you might be wondering what I believe about all that. Now, in my heart, I do believe we are reunited with loved ones who've died before us. But what that will look like in any detail is honestly beyond me. I am happy to leave those details up to God. And again, in the Bible, descriptions of our afterlife are inconsistent or fuzzy at best. But I still believe it, not necessarily because of what the Bible says, but because I'm convinced that love never ends. I believe love is powerful enough and enduring enough to extend beyond this life. That's the whole point of the resurrection stories, I think, that love conquers death. And please don't think I've gone off the deep end, but I have had some close encounters with people who have died, both with people not long after their death and with people who died a pretty long time ago. Now, I like to think of myself as a rational guy, and I'm always sober, so the best I can do is have some humility and admit that there's a lot more going on around us than our five senses don't always pick up on. My own ghostly experiences, by the way, have always been very positive. Those folks I've met have seemed very happy and peaceful, and I've come away from those moments with the sense that we all have something absolutely wonderful to look forward to. But can I explain how that really works? Nope. Who knows? No one's ever come back to describe the layout of heaven, so I don't quibble over the details. I just trust, I have faith that a life after this one is real, whatever it might look like. Personally, I imagine having nice long visits with my parents and with heroes of mine like Abraham Lincoln and Carl Sagan and Rosa Parks. And I like to think we'll realize that all the stuff we worried about and were mad about and fought with each other over, we'll finally grasp that none of it was really all that important in the big scheme of things. We'll see each other through truly loving eyes, the way God already sees us. But my biggest learning experience of being a hospice chaplain was coming to understand that spending a bunch of time pondering life after death is a bit of a waste. My hospice patients taught me that the time I know I have, this day, this hour, is when I have the ability to do something. This life is when I have hands and feet and a voice to make a positive difference, to be a friend, to lend a hand, to take a stand, to forgive and ask forgiveness, to be alert to and enjoy the thousands of beautiful things happening all around me every day, and to gain the perspective of what matters most. And what matters most, I learned from the hundreds of people whose hands I held as they lay dying, as they made their journey across the river from this life to the next, is love. More times than I can say, people who were angry with each other forgave and embraced each other. Parents reconciled with children they had not spoken to in years. And to a person, they all told me they did not know why they waited so long to express their forgiveness and grace and undying love to one another. They wished they had done it so much sooner because love they were learning is more powerful and enduring than anything. Love is eternal life. You and I don't need to wait to live in that way of love, and that was the answer to my own questions and my own searching. If you're like me, there's still much in our journey we're discovering, but I do know this: simply loving one another is the pathway that leads us there.